All right, we're 5-1 with a push in our last 7 NBA tier package bets on brockpage.com. And if you want to see my current record, you can do that right now for free by going to the homepage at brockpage.com. The Clippers take on the Cavaliers, 7 p.m. Eastern tip-off on Monday, March 14th, 2022. Happy Monday to you. Hopefully you had a great weekend. Cleveland's -5.5, totals 212. Now, we did see some early movement toward the over in this one. Pretty good two-way action on the sides. Now, the Cavs have played some consistently tough defense all season long. They're in the top 10 in defensive field goal percentage, and they're allowing only 103 points a game. Now, scoring-wise, Darius Garland is averaging over 21 points per contest, along with 3 rebounds, 8 assists. Meanwhile, Evan Mobley is scoring nearly 15 points a game himself, along with 8 rebounds. And speaking of boards, the Cavs are in the top 10 in defensive rebounding per game. They're taking on a Clipper team who doesn't score a whole lot of points themselves. As a matter of fact, these guys are averaging only 106 points a game this year. They currently find themselves in the bottom 10 in shooting from the field. Now, injury-wise, Covington, Powell, and Preston are still on the injury list for LA. Meanwhile, for Cleveland, LeVert, Markkanen, and Rondo are questionable for them. I'm going to lean toward the Cavs, -5.5, in the under 212. Next game, Blazers, Hawks, 7:30 East. Atlanta's -14 with the total at 230. Now, considerable, that's a tough word to say for me. Considerable movement on the side in the total in this one. We saw a 1.5-point move toward the Hawks and a 4-point move downward on the total. Now, the Hawks have had little issues scoring with the basketball this season. These guys are averaging 113 points a game, and they're also in the top 3 in shooting the 3-ball. Now, Trae Young is averaging over 28 points a game, along with 9 assists. Meanwhile, DeAndre Hunter is making nearly 40% of his three-pointers. He's also averaging 13 points a night. Now, when it comes to rebounding the basketball, the Hawks are amongst the better defensive rebounding teams in the game. They currently rank in the top 10 in defensive boards per contest. Now, they're taking on a Portland team who's been pretty bad at grabbing offensive boards themselves, and they're also in the bottom 5 in shooting the basketball from the field. But the Blazers' biggest problem this year has been their defensive effort. These guys are allowing nearly 114 points a game, and they're actually the worst team in the entire NBA in defending the 3-ball. Now, injury-wise, Winslow and Bledsoe are out. Meanwhile, for Atlanta on the other side of things, John Collins is questionable for them. I'm going to lean toward Atlanta, -14 in the over 230. All right, next ball game should be a good one. I'm talking about the Nuggets taking on the Sixers, 7:30 p.m. East. Philadelphia is -2.5 with the total at 220. Now, we saw a 2-point move on both the side and the total in this one here today. Philly opened 4.5 down to 2.5. Total opened 222 down to 220 even. Now, the Sixers are still going to work without the efforts of Danny Green. Not so sure how much of an impact that's going to have, but certainly a leader like that, you want to see him in action. Now, when it comes to rebounding the basketball, the Sixers are almost certainly going to get out-rebounding here on the offensive end of the court. Philly's actually in the bottom 3 in the NBA in offensive boards per game, believe it or not. Meanwhile, Denver, on the other side, they're amongst the best defensive rebounding teams in the game. The Nuggets are actually in the top 5 in defensive boards per contest. They're led by Nikola Jokic, who's averaging over 13.5 rebounds a game, along with 26 points. And speaking of scoring, Will Barton's averaging nearly 15 points a game himself, along with 4 rebounds. When it comes to shooting the basketball, Denver's making 48% of their field goals this season. They're actually in the top 3 in the association in that particular category. Now, injury-wise, Gordon and Najee are questionable for the Nuggets. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Denver, +2.5 in the over 220. Next matchup, it is going to be Hornets versus the Thunder, 8 o'clock Eastern start time. Charlotte's -10 with the total at 232. And we saw a 0.5-point move toward the over and a 2.5-point move toward Charlotte in the early wagering. Once again, Charlotte opened 7.5 up to 10. Total opened 231.5 up to 232. And even though OKC has been fairly anemic offensively this year, it's actually the Hornets who do a really poor job on the defensive end of the court. Charlotte's amongst the worst defensive rebounding teams in the game. They're also allowing 115 points a night. Now they're taking on a Thunder team who could potentially out-rebound them here today. OKC is actually in the top 10 in the league in offensive boards per contest. And they're led by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's scoring 24 points a game. Now, teammate Darius Bazley, he's also averaging double-digit points a game himself, along with 6.5 rebounds. When it comes to the injury report, Wiggins, Favors, and Williams are questionable. Giddey and Robinson Earl are still out. Meanwhile, for Charlotte, on the other side of things, Hayward and Bouknight are still out for them. I think OKC should be able to keep this one close. A lot of people, a lot of public likes to tail Charlotte. They love the flash of these guys scoring a bunch of points, but they're not a technically sound team. Neither is OKC, but this is a pretty big number here. I'm going to lean toward OKC plus 10, keeping this one close in the over 232. Next contest, it is going to be Timberwolves versus the Spurs, 8:30 p.m. East. Minnesota's -4 with the total at 240. Now, I'm not sure if you realized it yet, but the T-Wolves score an awful lot of points. Matter of fact, these guys are second in the NBA in scoring, and they're led by Karl Anthony Towns, who averages over 24 points a game, along with nearly double-digit rebounds. And if that ain't enough, Towns is drilling 40% of his shots from downtown. Really not much this guy can't do. Meanwhile, Anthony Edwards, he should be back in action here today. He's scoring over 21 points a night himself, along with 4 rebounds. Now they're taking on a San Antonio team who allows way too many points, and they also do a poor job of rebounding defensively. The Spurs are currently in the bottom 10 in points allowed per contest, bottom 5 in defensive boards. And as bad as San Antonio's been defensively, these guys are equally as bad at shooting from the foul line offensively. The Spurs find themselves in the bottom 10 in the league in offensive field goal percentage. Now, injury-wise, McDermott, Bates, Diop, and Langford are out. Wieskamp and Kasak are questionable. When it comes to Minnesota on the other side, Reed, McLaughlin, and Beverly are listed as questionable for them. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Minnesota -4 in the over 240. Next ball game, getting into that 10 o'clock slate, a little bit later slate here. I'm talking about the Bulls taking on the Kings, 10 o'clock Eastern start time. Chicago's -3.5, totals 237. Now we're seeing some significant movement on both the side and the total in this one. Chicago opened 4.5 down to 3.5. Total opened 234 and a hook, all the way up to 237. Now, regardless of the line movement, Chicago is currently the best shooting team in the association. They're leading the league in offensive field goal percentage, first in the NBA in shooting from long range as well. And even though Zach LaVine is battling a knee injury right now, DeMar DeRozan's still scoring over 28 points a game, along with 5 rebounds and 5 assists. Meanwhile, Nikola Vucevic is grabbing a whole bunch of rebounds. This guy's getting 11.5 boards a game, 11.5 boards a game, 11.5 rebounds a game. That's what I'm trying to say. He's also averaging 18 points. And speaking of rebounds, the Bulls are in the top 10 in defensive rebounding per contest. They're taking on a Sacramento team who will most likely get out-rebounded on the offensive end of the court themselves. These guys are amongst the worst in the West in offensive rebounding, and they're also in the bottom 10 in shooting the 3-ball. But obviously the Kings' biggest issue this season has been their defensive play. They're allowing 116 points per contest, and their opponents are making 48% of their field goals against them. Now, injury-wise, Len and Holiday are questionable for the Kings. I'm going to lean toward Chicago -3.5 in the over 237. All right, next contest, game of the night. A lot of folks staying up late for this one. I'm talking about the Bucks versus the Jazz, 10 o'clock Eastern start time. Now, Milwaukee is -1.5 on the road with the total at 236. And we are getting some steady two-way action on the side in this one. No real significant movement there. Now, total-wise, we did see a 1-point move upward on the number. Now, when it comes to selecting a winner in this one, this game's being featured as my NBA tier package bet on BrockPage.com here today, where once again, we're currently 5-1 with a push in our last 7 NBA tier package bets on that website. So if you want to see whether I like the Jazz catching the 1.5 at home, or if I like Milwaukee laying the 1.5 while traveling, there's only one way to do that. There's only one way to find out, and that's to sign up for my NBA tier package bet on BrockPage.com. But as far as making a free pick goes for this contest, I'm actually leaning toward the under 236 in that ball game. Next contest, Wizards, Warriors, 10 o'clock East. Golden State's -12.5, totals 225 and a hook. And even though there's really not a whole lot to complain about with the Warriors statistically, they've really failed the eye test over the past few weeks or so. Not playing great basketball. And oddly enough, as good as these guys are shooting the basketball here, they're actually in the bottom 10 in the NBA right now in shooting from the stripe. Now they're taking on a Washington team who still does a nice job with the basketball in their hands despite their record this year. These guys actually find themselves in the top 10 in the NBA in shooting from the field. And they're currently being led by Kristaps Porzingis, who's scoring nearly 20 points a game with his new team. Meanwhile, Kyle Kuzma, he is averaging 17 points a night himself, along with 8 rebounds. So pretty good production out of both of those guys. Porzingis doing a great job in a couple of games here with the Wizards. Now, when it comes to the injury report, the Wizards are mostly healthy right now, for the exception of Bradley Beal, obviously, who's done for the year. I think the Wizards should be able to keep this one close. I'm going to lean toward Washington +12.5. And the under 225 and a hook. And with that, guys, we're going to jump into our next and final matchup for the show. It is going to be Raptors versus the Lakers, 10:30 p.m. East. Toronto's -4.5 with the total at 225. And even though we haven't seen much movement on the total in this one, we actually did see a 0.5 point fade of Toronto in the early going here. They opened 5 down to 4.5, and that line move is most likely due to the status of Freddie VanVleet. He's questionable here today with some knee soreness for Toronto. Having said that, though, the Lakers on the other side have certainly not been playing great basketball over the past 2 months. And the Raptors still have Pascal Siakam in the lineup here today, who's actually their leading scorer. Now, Pascal's averaging nearly 22 points a game, along with 8 rebounds and 5 assists. Meanwhile, Gary Trent Jr., he's scoring over 18 points a game himself, along with a couple assists. Now, when it comes to defensive play in this one, Toronto allows only 107 points a game. So these guys have been pretty sound defensively. They're in the top 10 in the NBA in defensive points per game. They're amongst the best teams in the league in that category. Now, they're taking on a Laker team who plays some of the worst defense in the league themselves. They're allowing 114 points a game. They're currently in the bottom 5 in defensive boards. Now, the Lakers are also still going to work without Anthony Davis and Kendrick Nunn. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Toronto -4.5 and the over 225. And with that, guys, that's going to do it for me. Don't forget to check me out on BrockPage.com. Now, you may be wondering what the difference is between what I do here on YouTube and what I do on my website at BrockPage.com. Well, what I do here on YouTube is I'll handicap the entire slate of games in any given sport, side and total. And what I do on my website is I'll actually share with you which one of these free YouTube picks on my channel that I'm actually betting on personally. We currently have over 880 members who are signed up and active on that website right now. Just remember, guys, if you sign up for a membership here today on my website, you're actually going to get access to that package every single day, all the way until the end of March. I always tell folks in every single video The earlier in the month you sign up, the better. And guys, if you want to get access to every single package that I offer on that website, you're going to want to sign up for my board member tier. Not only do board members get access to the board member tier pick itself, you actually get access to every single bet that I give out on that website all the way through the end of March. But most importantly, guys, I got to thank you for joining me right here on YouTube. Really hope you enjoyed all this great free content, all this great free information. And with that said, guys, happy Monday to you. Best of luck to you. And I look forward to seeing you later on today on my website at brockpage.com.